Good afternoon and welcome to the official press conference following the first day of the Justice and Home Affairs Council. On stage we have the Danish Minister for Justice, Peter Hummelgaard, and Commissioner for Democracy, Justice, the Rule of Law and Consumer Protection, Mr. Michael McGrath. As always, we will start with brief statements from the Minister and the Commissioner, and then we'll open the floor for questions. Minister, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. Today marks the first formal ministerial meeting on justice affairs during the Danish presidency, and it has been a pleasure to have met with my esteemed colleagues and exchanged views on some important topics. We began the day with a state of play on Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. This war is a reminder that our security and our values are inseparable. That is why we stand by the vision of a strong Europe in a changing world, because in times of war and uncertainty, unity is our greatest strength. And supporting Ukraine's fight for peace and freedom is a priority for the Danish presidency. The ministers received an update on how member states and the EU are assisting Ukraine in its fight against impunity regarding crimes committed in connection with Russia's war of aggression. We then moved on to discuss the future of Eurojust, where my colleagues shared their views on how the agency should further enhance its support for judicial cooperation. I hope that the discussion today has given some valuable pointers for the agency and the Commission in the further work of evaluating the agency. The next topic on the agenda was a state of play on the Commission's work with access to data for effective criminal investigations, which is one of my top priorities during the Danish presidency. Law enforcement authorities must have the necessary tools, including adequate access to data to effectively combat and prosecute crime. With the many new and also advanced technological possibilities that exist today, a changed crime picture has followed, where criminals use technology to hide their crimes, communicate and even recruit children and young people into organized crime. For example, in recent years, organized criminals have tried to hide behind encrypted communication services such as Sky ECC and EncroChat. This is a major challenge for police investigations into organized crime. Today, we mainly focused on data retention, lawful interception and the issue of encryption. On data retention, we expect to receive the Commission's impact assessment in the first quarter of 2026, assessing the need for an EU initiative on data retention. On lawful interception, we especially look forward to the Commission's suggestion on how to tackle non-cooperative communication providers. With regard to encryption, the Commission is preparing a technology roadmap on encryption, which is envisaged for the second quarter of 2026. It will be very interesting to see how they propose to solve issues related to encrypted data. Lastly, we had a profound discussion on political participation as a cornerstone of the rule of law. Politicians today face a wide spectrum of threats, from physical violence and intimidation to online hate speech, with women candidates being more frequently targeted. Online platforms have further strengthened these risks. Online exposure make politicians and elected representatives more vulnerable to targeted harassment and abuse. At the same time, politicians have a public role and freedom of speech. Free media, as well as the right to publicly criticize the political leadership, must be ensured. The question of finding the right balance in protecting freedom of speech while still ensuring an information space with reliable information, safe from abuse and harm, is crucial in our modern democratic society. I think we had a very fruitful discussion on the balance between protecting politicians from threats and ensuring open public debate, and if politicians should have a higher level of tolerance than other citizens. I will now give the floor to Commissioner Michael McGrath. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and good afternoon, Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by thanking Minister Peter for his leadership in driving forward the Danish Presidency's ambitious agenda in the area of justice, and today's discussion certainly reflects that level of ambition. We tackled some of the pressing justice issues facing Europe today, including rule of law developments across the EU, holding Russia accountable for its war of aggression against Ukraine. We discussed the future of Eurojust and improving access to data for cross-border criminal investigations. I also presented the first progress report on simplification, enforcement and implementation in my portfolio, a moment to reflect on where we are and also to chart the course ahead. We concluded our discussions by looking forward to the European Democracy Shield, our joint pledge to protect and defend democracy now and for future generations of European citizens. So we kicked off our discussions with a productive exchange this morning on rule of law developments in the field of justice. I welcome that the Danish Presidency has put this topic on the agenda, focusing on how political participation is at the cornerstone of rule of law. This is a topic that is also essential for the resilience of our democracies. As you know, in her State of the Union address, President von der Leyen stressed how Europe's independence is about protecting our freedoms. The rule of law and preserving, protecting and promoting our democracies are essential guarantors of those freedoms. But democracy depends on active participation, political candidates and elected representatives who are free from harassment and free from threats and acts of violence. And the Commission has already taken actions to address these risks to political participation. For example, the Violence Against Women Directive has criminalised incitement to violence or hatred based on gender, responding to how women in particular are too often being targeted, which in turn can often dissuade them from entering or indeed from remaining in politics. To protect political dissent and free speech, the DSA also ensures that users have the right to challenge unlawful or arbitrary moderation decisions by platforms. We are also strengthening our response to threats from foreign information, manipulation and interference, as well as disinformation. These threats often come directly from hostile foreign actors who actively seek to undermine trust in our open, free and pluralistic democracies. As President von der Leyen announced in her State of the Union, a new European Centre for Democratic Resilience will improve our collective capacity to detect, monitor and analyse information manipulation and disinformation. This will be part of a broader European Democracy Shield, which I will be presenting in the coming weeks to the College of Commissioners, and which will be accompanied by a dedicated EU civil society strategy. Democracy is not a destination. It is a daily commitment that needs nurturing, strengthening and enforcement. The Democracy Shield paves the way to a future where democratic freedoms remain strongly anchored in our foundations. More than 3.5 years into Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, the Commission continues to work to ensure accountability for the crimes committed in and against Ukraine. And today I stress the importance of continued support for the International Criminal Court to investigate and prosecute such brutal crimes, to hold accountable those responsible for the Russian war of aggression. The swift establishment of the Special Tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine remains a top priority. And this is why I am pleased to announce that the EU will strengthen its support for the Special Tribunal by providing rapid response funding of €10 million to its advanced team over the next 24 months. We count on our Member States, other members of the core group and as many countries as possible to join the agreement establishing the Tribunal and conclude cooperation agreements as quickly as possible. Justice for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people also means reparations for the damage caused. And that is why today I also highlighted the importance of the International Claims Commission for Ukraine and how the Commission will continue to support its establishment. Depriving the Russian Federation of its means to wage war is an essential part in bringing a just and lasting peace to Ukraine and to Ukrainian people. We will continue our fight against the violation of sanctions through the complete and accurate transposition of the Directive on Sanctions Violations. We also discussed the next steps in strengthening Eurojust, which, as you know, is the EU's agency for criminal justice cooperation. Eurojust is a real success story in strengthening justice and security across our Union. It plays a crucial role in reinforcing judicial cooperation in fighting cross-border crime. The Commission successfully concluded an evaluation of the agency earlier this year, and we are now looking at how to support Eurojust further, especially in its role in fighting organised crime and in strengthening the EU's internal security, including by enhancing cooperation with the European Public Prosecutor's Office and indeed Europol. We also discussed strengthening the fight against organised crime by improving data access in the context of investigations without compromising the safeguarding of our fundamental rights. And finally, I also took the opportunity to update Ministers on the first simplification, implementation and enforcement report from my portfolio, a report which keeps our simplification and competitiveness agenda firmly on track. While the report highlights areas where the Commission is monitoring implementation and enforcement, it also looks ahead to the future. In the coming months, we will identify simplification measures that could be integrated into the planned Digital Fairness Act. We will also continue our work on the 28th regime proposal to provide simpler, more flexible and faster procedures to help companies operate within the EU. So, all in all, a very packed agenda, very good discussions with colleagues on issues that I am sure you will agree are of importance to citizens of the European Union. Thank you for the opportunity of setting out at high level what we discussed, and look forward now to our Q&A.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Minister. Now let's open the floor for questions. Please start by stating your name and media, AFP, please.
Hi, Camille Condessu from AFP. I first have a question for you, Minister. You mentioned this idea of discussing whether or not politicians should have a higher tolerance to political violence. Could I ask you how you personally feel about that, and what was the opinion of other member states? And for you, Commissioner, just how bad is political violence currently in Europe? Just to have your assessment, do you fear, for instance, that events similar to the likes of the assassination of Charlie Kirk could happen here in Europe? And do you not fear that, in light of the current threats, the democracy shield might be a bit of a drop in the ocean? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I would like firstly to say that it's not of my opinion, and it didn't reflect the discussions during the council meeting today, that politicians should have a higher tolerance for political violence. I think it was merely a part of the discussion that, and also part of case law, that politicians should have a higher tolerance when it comes to, for example, hate speech online, and accept that there's a tough debate in online forums and even in town hall meetings as such. My own opinion is that politicians, as well as anybody, shouldn't accept any level of violence, threats or anything else. And I think it's very important also that elected officials do not accept that. What we have seen over the past 5 years, and increasingly over just the past couple of years, is that 5 or 7 years ago, when we talked to each other, we said, well, maybe the tone is harsh, maybe the climate is tough when it comes to online political discussions. But people never take it out in the open streets. They're still polite, still curious when you meet them in town hall meetings. What we can see now is that there has been a major shift. The polarized and uncompromising and also hateful speech that you see online has moved out to the open, and is more and more frequently also transcended into threats and even violent attacks. And I think it's very important that we discuss this issue not merely as a question of protecting elected officials and their spouses and children, but also seeing it as a broader issue, because the same goes for all persons who are occupied and working in public service positions. In Denmark, at least, we can see that there are an increase in threats, violence, and hate speech between all groups of people working in public service, from the garbage handlers to the school teachers to the nurses, and even to our police officers and correctional prison officers. So this is a broader debate, and I think some of it has to be addressed within our criminal codes, where we have to point out clear marks of what we as a society in a democracy should allow and tolerate. But a lot of it is about democratic culture, and there has been a slide to the worse when it comes to democratic culture, and that was also reflected in the discussion at Council today.
I think what was very evident from the discussion that we had early this afternoon was that this isn't an issue that's isolated to one member state. Many members actually spoke of their own personal experience or the experience of their family, and I think there was a very good recognition among all of those that spoke at our meeting earlier on that when you're in public life you have to be prepared to accept robust criticism, and that is as it should be. The problem is when it steps over the line and it becomes criminal, and whether it be a direct threat or harassment or the acting out of a threat and physical violence. And we have had incidents of that within the European Union, and they are quite high profile when they do happen. And the concern that I have is that if this goes unaddressed, we end up with a democracy that is less representative, because we know some people get more abuse than others. Women attract a particular level of harassment and a nastiness that isn't always there for men, though of course it can be, but speaking as a general trend, that is a concern. And we end up with fewer women, we end up with fewer young people becoming interested in getting into politics or remaining within it, and fewer representatives of minority groups. So that really is what we need to avoid, because then our democracy becomes less representative and it becomes a poorer democracy as a result of that. And I think it is the case, as Peter has said, that some of the coarseness that we see online, it can spill out into real life, and it can perhaps encourage or motivate others to take it a step further and engage in acts of violence which are completely unacceptable, because any act of violence against a public representative is an attack on democracy itself. So we are examining this issue in the context of the Democracy Shield, and we will bring forward a proposal that will certainly feature within the Democracy Shield, this issue of safety of candidates and of public representatives, because it is in itself a direct threat to our democracy, and that's why we do believe that it needs addressing. But we should also be clear, an attack on anyone, including a frontline worker or anyone in society, is completely unacceptable, and the same holds true if that person happens to be a politician or a person in public life.
Do we have more questions in the room? Otherwise, I will turn to Sam Clark, Politico. Sam, I think we lost your video connection, but can you hear us? Now we hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry, my computer froze. Yes, I have a question on the CSAM legislation, which was meant to be on the agenda, but is not anymore. This is a question mostly for the Minister. I think we know why it's not on the agenda, but can you say anything about your reaction to this? Do you feel disappointed? Do you feel that it's been a failure of, sort of political discussion? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I think it's to no surprise, including Politico, that we, of course, from the Danish presidency, has put and will continue to put in a lot of work when it comes to the CSAM regulation. We think it's an important regulation that we need to move forward, and also just reminding everybody, including the media, that the reason why we have put a lot of effort into it is that we're working against a tough deadline. The tough deadline being April 2026, where the current voluntary mechanism is meeting its end, and from that day on, there will be no scanning on any platforms for materials, videos, pictures of sexual abuse of children. So that's what we're working with the deadline against, and I mean, we will continue, of course, the ongoing and constructive negotiations towards a sustainable compromise. That is our aim, and I think that it was not yet at a stage possible to secure the necessary support for a partial general approach, and that's why we concluded that the discussions would be better to continue the weeks ahead bilaterally among countries and parties, where we need to try to meet a compromise. Of course, the Danish presidency has laid out our attempt to have a compromise, and we will see going on from here what needs to be adjusted in that. But for the Danish presidency, it has all along been our main focus is how can we, in a more efficient and stronger manner than today, try to oblige the platforms to take responsibility of what is being transported and shared on their platforms. I mean, Save the Children, the organization Save the Children, assessed that each second across the 27 EU member states, at least 2 pictures or videos are being shared of children being, I'm just going to say it out bluntly, being raped. Children being raped, sexually abused, etc. And that is also the foundation of an industry that unfortunately is rising, where organized criminals are earning more and more money on this industry, and more children are getting sexually abused. So that has been the aim. Of course, we respect that there are different approaches in this discussion for some member states and organizations. Of course, protecting privacy has been an important issue. Of course, it is for Denmark as well. We need to strike the right balance, and we will continue to work to see if we can find a solution to strike that balance between privacy and also, on the other hand, having effective tools where we can oblige private companies that today are being used as a platform for large-scale sharing of videos and pictures of sexual abuse of children.
And if I may just add a word on behalf of the Commission, and this is a file that Commissioner Brunner is leading on because it falls under DG Home, but it is an important file for the whole Commission, and for the reasons that Peter has articulately outlined there. And it's important to underline that time is now of the essence, given that the interim regulation will expire in April, and so we stand ready to continue to support the Presidency with a view to a compromise being agreed at Council level. And it's worth noting that the European Parliament has already adopted its negotiating position, and so hopefully we can continue to see the work make progress here and deliver on an agreement on the negotiating position as quickly as possible. And I think we just have to bring it down to what is the fundamental value of this. It is about protecting children, and the reality that detection of child sexual abuse by the companies has been instrumental in rescuing children from ongoing abuse, and it should continue. So our overall priority is make sure that there's no legal gap arising here because of a failure to reach agreement. And if we put the interests of children at the forefront of our consideration, then I think it should be possible for the Council to reach agreement on its negotiating position, and then the negotiations proper between the co-legislators can get underway, and the Commission will stand ready to support that in every way we possibly can.
Sam, if I understand correctly, you have a follow-up question?
Yes, thank you. It's just a follow-up question about the narrative around the legislation recently. I'm sure you've been aware of the chat control campaign. I just wonder basically if you have a response to that campaign and that narrative, and if you think that perhaps the conversation has shifted in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Well, I think now I have to consider my words. I'm not a journalist. If I were a journalist, I would try to follow the money on how that narrative has arisen. But again, I'm not a journalist. You can take up on my lead if you want to. But I mean, I think that we're trying to the best of our ability, of course, to outline what is this regulation really about, and more so also outline what has the Danish compromise of the Commission proposed regulation been about. There's never been any suggestion of scanning of chats or anything of the like. Much of the narrative had also been built up on an idea that EU bodies or even national bodies would be able to, conduct surveillance of private chats, and that's not the case. The case has been that we would like to oblige private companies, private platforms, of taking a responsibility to limit the levels of enormous sharing of child sexual abuse materials. And on the other hand, of course, there has also been valid, also technical, but valid technical and privacy points been made during the discussion. And we're, of course, taking all that into consideration and see how we can work forward with that, but at the end of the day, this is also a discussion on how are we able to regulate and oblige private platforms, private companies, to ensure that they also take responsibility of larger societal concerns. And already today, there are during the temporary regulation, platforms are voluntarily scanning materials and reporting materials by the numbers of millions of files, and that is the function of today, and what we want to do that with an inspiration from that temporary regulation. We want to oblige those platforms not willing to cooperate today, but of course, that being said, there's no doubt that we need to do more work, and we'll do the best to our effort to strike a compromise that a qualified majority in the Council can see themselves in, and there's still more work that needs to be done.
I see no more questions in the room, no on the Zoom, so I think we will conclude the press conference. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Thank you so much, Minister.